Okay. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the World Expert Series by Kachi Kena. The reason we are doing this series is to introduce you to tools and technologies outside of Malawi, but which we believe that you in Malawi can use or you in Africa can use. And the goal is to show that in places like the US and Canada and Singapore and China, the tools that people there are using or companies there are using are very similar to the tools that you have access to. So it's a matter of you combining these already existing tools to create solutions. So in particular in programming, we know that there are tools that big companies are using that you as individuals can also use. Okay? And our company is bringing together these experts from around the world just to give you a tip of the iceberg of what the many tools that are available out there. Okay, so we hope that these sessions can act as pointers that help you start doing something with the many tools that are available. So today we have Bastien from Canada, and she will talk to us about progressive web applications. Anne, it's your time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christopher. So hello, my name is Anne. I am Anne Bastien. So you might tell from the family name, it's not an English family name, it's French. So I live in Eastern Canada, in Montreal. So most people here speak French and some do speak English, but unfortunately not everybody. I'm 21 years old. I am currently studying as a software engineer at Concordia University. It's an English university in Montreal. I'm in my first year. Unlike I think some of you here are maybe in your third year or something, so it's a little intimidating, but it's okay. I'm not here to talk about something I've learned in school, but something I've self-taught for a project I'm currently working on. Outside of university, and outside of coding, I'll have a lot of other interests. One of them being languages, which I think in a way it has a lot to do with programming as well. So currently I'm learning Korean, and I've also started learning Mandarin recently, just out of pure interest. And as you can tell probably from behind here, I also really like reading. So that's just a bit about me. My goal today is to briefly introduce PWAs, or progressive web apps. I'll try to refer to it as PWA because it's shorter, and hopefully to motivate you also towards building your own PWA. I'm also going to introduce a couple new tools that you may or may have not heard of. It's okay if you have no background knowledge in this. And hopefully you can just take this hour to arouse your interest in PWAs. I'm really just going to go briefly over it, not too much into details, but just more understand the power of it per se. So a quick disclaimer, as I said, my experience with PWAs is completely self-taught. I've been learning it for an app I'm developing these days with 4 other colleagues. And so I'll navigate you through how I learned about it and why it's important. Also, I'm going to be using 2 screens, so you might see my gaze going back and forth. Feel free to put your cameras on or off, whichever you're most comfortable with. There's really no worries at all. However, you could all mute yourself so I can easier for me to concentrate and so everybody can focus each other. If Caleb, you could mute yourself, that would be great. All right, and I may ask you to thumbs up or thumbs down at some point just to make sure that I'm not going too fast for the demo. All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna share my screen. I'll just be a moment. Share screen. Okay, perfect. So right now you should be able to see my PowerPoint. So here we go. All right, so first gonna do, thank you. So firstly, we're gonna go over just generally what a PWA is. So as I said, it stands for Progressive Web App. That doesn't say much in and of itself. So a progressive web app, if I'm just to explain it very on the surface, very simply, is an application that you can have, for instance, on your phone, that instead of being coded with things like Swift for iOS or Kotlin for Android, it uses your web technologies, so HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. yet it's still an application on your phone, okay? So it's an app that looks and feels like a native app, but uses web technology. So that's really just the brief overview of what it is. And so you can add it to your home screen, you can add it as a desktop app, you can have it also just as a website, because at its core, that's what it is, it's a website, but that you make available as an app as well by adding some different features that we're gonna look over a bit later. So for instance, you'll have offline capabilities such as a native app would, you can have receive push notifications, but it's still at its core hosted on the web. So some examples of PWAs you may or may have not heard of is Pinterest, Twitter, Uber, Starbucks, etc. So you have quite a few. And initially, most of these websites were not PWAs. You can take a website and then turn it into a PWA after. It really isn't that complicated. So we'll discuss that as well. All right, so we're going to just look over a bit what are the advantages of a PWA. Number one, which I've already mentioned briefly, is its cross-device functionality. So you're coding once, yet you have access on multiple platforms. So you have access on the web, as a website, on your phone, on your iPad, etc. You can also have it as a desktop app, but that's not a functionality that's often used, but you can if you want to. Number two, and the one I find the most important, is connectivity independence. So for instance, if you have an app on your phone right now, if you opened it and you had no access to network, no network connection, you wouldn't expect to have like a blank screen with an error, right? You would expect to have some sort of like app shell. So maybe you'll have like some tabs on the bottom, you'll have something per se there, right? So there's some offline capabilities that you have access to. So what a PWA is really good for is connectivity independence, because it'll work very well even if you're offline or you have low connectivity. And this is one of the key features of PWAs, and it's important because 60% of the world population is on 2G, and 59% of users abandon a website if it's too slow to load. So PWAs will often use caching, which allows you to have this offline capability, and we're going to look how that's possible with service workers a bit later. So in sum, PWAs is a great way to democratize access to services. Thirdly, PWAs from a business side aspect is great because it results in higher conversion rates. So if I asked you right now, how many times a month do you visit a website versus you download an app, you probably visit way more websites than you download apps. In fact, there's like an average of 0 apps per month that mobile app users download. So PWAs harness the reachability of the web and allow users to download the app by simply clicking a URL. And so you get much higher conversion rates this way. So your app is discoverable online, right? Because it's hosted on the web. And it won't, in this case, be hosted on an app store, for instance, or Android store, that you would need your proprietary technology stuff such as Swift or Kotlin. But it can be found instead on Google Play Store or Microsoft Store. And it allows you to also remove the middleman. So you're saving that 30% sum cut that the App Store would have taken if you had a native app and you were putting it on the App Store. And due to its web nature, search engines can find them much more easily. So if you can really work on your search engine optimization, PWAs will very be advantageous to you. Lastly, it's very kind towards memory storage. It does not use a lot of memory storage because it's being hosted on the web and not on your device itself. So your app will take just a few kilobytes, contrarily to maybe WhatsApp, for instance, which can take almost a gigabyte of space on your phone. All right, so might not be convinced yet that PWAs is the way to go. I'll just maybe give a few stories of companies that have switched to PWA. So as I mentioned earlier, Starbucks is a PWA and was able to increase its daily active users twicefold since changing to a PWA. Pinterest increased their core engagements by 60%, and increased by 44%. Their user-generated ad revenue and time spent on website increased by 40%. So quite significant numbers. And also Google found that PWA's install convert banners, so like, you know, the click to install here, will convert 5 to 6 times more users than if it was a native install banner saying like, click on this and download in the App Store, just because it's so easy to install versus a native app. Some of you may also be wondering, why not just make a responsive mobile website? Because it would have like it looks very similar at a first glance. However, mobile websites there's obviously a disadvantage to it in that, for instance, if your app is something where you have an account, usually on your mobile website, you'd have to keep signing in. Whereas if you had an app, you just can go, you're already signed in, do whatever you have to do. Also, mobile websites won't have push notifications, you won't have offline support, right? So if you refresh your page and you have no network connection, you're just gonna get a blank page. Some people are not as attracted to PWAs because of hardware access. So PWAs are rather recent. And if you look at documentation, let's say from 2018, they'll be like, hey, you don't have access to this, you don't have access to that. But that's already changed so much in the past 2 years. A lot of things that people were complaining about in 2018, you have access now in 2021, and there's still more being used, being added. So for instance, some things you can access is geolocation, camera. I'm mentioning this because mobile devices have a lot of sensors, right? Such as accelerometers, gyroscopes, etc. And some people wonder if with a PWA you can access these. So geolocation is one, camera is definitely one, augmented reality for some, web Bluetooth. What I suggest you do is go on caniuse.com, and from there you can check whether a browser supports the hardware that you want to access. So for instance, if I go geolocation, I do enter, I can see the green says that it's supported. So I can see for all of these browsers, whether it's supported or not. Some deal breakers for the moment is NFC, so near field communication. Usually you cannot be accessed by PWA. So that's something to keep in mind if that's something you wanted to add to your app. Then maybe for the moment, I wouldn't suggest doing PWA. I'm just gonna go back to the presentation. Where did it go? Right here, okay, perfect. All right, so what are the requirements? Like, how do you take a website and turn it into a PWA? So number one is a manifest.json file. So you need to have a manifest.json file. All it is a very, very short file. And it allows you essentially it contains the metadata of your app and allows you to have it as an app on your phone by providing information such as the name, the background color, the icon, so the icon that will be displayed for the app itself. So it's a very short file. Every PWA needs one. Number two is your service worker. So service worker is a type of web worker. It's a JavaScript file that works in the background away from the main thread, and it acts as a proxy between the user web app and the network. So service workers, what they do is they allow to add functionality that a native application would normally require. So it allows to make your website more app-like. So for instance, you would use service worker to do periodic background syncs, incorporate push notifications. They'll usually concern functionalities that don't need a web page or user interaction. So its main ability is to intercept and handle network requests. So most of the time you don't need to code actually your service worker itself. It's also rather new and can tend to be a bit complicated to code. So a lot of people will use libraries such as a workbox, which I'll show you right now, to copy and paste what you want your service worker to do. So I'm just gonna open it here. So workbox. Okay, here. So this is workbox. And here's the logo for PWA. So you might see this a lot if you research about it in the future. So some things, for instance, if you want your service worker to cache Google Fonts such that offline your fonts stay the same, you could just copy and paste this code into a serviceworker.js file. You can also decide if you want to cache JavaScript and CSS. If it's something you don't find is important to your app to have offline, you don't have to put it. You can cache images. So depending on what your application is, you might want to cache some things, and other things you might not want to cache because it would take too much space, for instance. Service workers can also be modified to determine how long you want something to be cached for, when to cache something, etc. So its offline capability mostly comes from the fact that it will cache what is important for your app offline, like that. So essentially, service workers allow you to open your app on your phone and not get that blank page, but have at least some content that's displayed. If I go, for instance, so I mentioned earlier that Pinterest was a PWA. If I go, I was doing it earlier, so we're just gonna reload it. Okay, so if I go on Pinterest, I'll close this. It's just so I can show where I got from. If I right click, I'm on Google Chrome browser. So I'm going to use the Google Chrome development tools. If I go inspect, and I go right here on the top right in application, you'll notice service worker is the second one right here. If I just check off offline to see how it would work offline, and I reload the page, this is what Pinterest has decided to be available offline. So instead of, like, if I was just on the website and I turned off my network and I reloaded it, I'd get like an error. Whereas with a PWA, when I reload, I'll get like the nav bar on the bottom. You can still see my profile picture. They'll also put a little message, hey, you're offline, check your internet connection, and they'll leave some tabs. So you still get somewhat of a display. All right. So yeah, their main purpose is enabling offline capabilities through caching, and they provide cache versions, as you've just seen, of the site when no network connectivity is available. And so this usually makes your user very happy, since it also means almost instant page loads. And you'll also benefit not only for offline, but also for slow or lowered connectivity. So to sum up Service Worker, because they can be a bit abstract at times, is they allow your website to have an app-like feel by providing at least some partial offline access thanks to caching, as well as app features such as background sync and push notifications. To have your Service Worker function, they need to be registered in your page to tell the browser essentially where your Service Worker JavaScript file is. Okay, so lastly, service workers only run over HTTPS. So therefore, today we'll be hosting our app using Firebase hosting in the demo. All right, moving on. One tool that I highly suggest using if you're making a PWA is Lighthouse. So again, we're going to go back to Pinterest right up here. And so I've already shown you right here that if you go in application, you can see, number one, you can see the manifest. So here you see the logos of Pinterest. So if it was a desktop app, you would have this logo. The background color, because maybe if you're on iOS, I think your app shape tends to be square, so they'll put the background color for that. The name also they'll display, so you can see that all on the right. You'll see the service worker as I showed just earlier. I know there's a service worker because of this like little green dot right here on the status, means that it's running. It says activated and is running. And then if I go up here, so on the bar where I have memory, application, security, and I go further, I have Lighthouse right here. And if I click generate report, it might take a moment, so I'll just let that warm up. It'll let me know whether Pinterest is installable as a progressive web app. Okay, so performance is not doing great today, but that's okay. That's not what we're interested in. On the right, you'll see progressive web app, and there's like a little like green plus sign on it. This means it's installable as a progressive web app. So if I just click on that, as I just did, it'll tell me, number one, that I'm meeting all the requirements for it to be installable. So they say your web app manifest and service worker meet the installability requirements. And they'll also put some sort of checklist so that you can optimize your PWA and make sure it works fast enough, and that you have other different things that they suggest for PWA. So you can always look over that, but your main concern is whether it's installable or not. If it's not installable, it'll tell you. While we're in Lighthouse, you can also look at your search engine optimization, your best practices, accessibility, and performance, and they'll tell you what is working well and not well. So right now, the performance is not great. Since PWAs, you want them to load fast, you can always look right here. There's a button called View Original Trace. And it shows the whole timeline of your app loading, and you can find the tasks that have like the little red triangle on the upper right corner. These are the ones that took too long, and that you may want to go look and see if there's a way that you can optimize that to make it work faster. So we're going to use Lighthouse later when we're going to be building our own app, just to see whether our app is installable or not and what's missing if it isn't.
You only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow.